So I'm back with another installment of these sort of vinyl conversations. I have contacted some people that I really admire when it comes to vinyl, but not only vinyl, but music in general. And I couldn't really believe it when this guy answered and said that he wanted to be in having a conversation and showing records, talking about records on my channel. And the guy I'm talking about is Dennis Lyxzén. Dennis Lyxzén from Refused and International Noise Conspiracy, and he's out there touring with Refused and INVSN right now. Dennis Lyxzén is the coolest guy walking on this earth. Like, I shit you not, he is the coolest guy. Not only is he really good looking and he does amazing music, but he's also like this stand-up guy. He's just super friendly. Like, he's this super artist touring all around the world, and he just sits down having a conversation with me down here in my basement for 1 hour, talking about records, and we are showing records to each other, recommending records. It's just insane. So it's one of the best sort of hours I've ever spent in my life. And I am married and I have a kid, so I'm just kidding. So please just sit back and enjoy this ride with me when I had a small sort of vinyl conversation with Dennis Lyxzén. Cue intro.
But I was saying, like, you were telling me that a part of you wanting to do this is because you collect records and it's a big deal, but you don't have a lot of friends around you that collects records.
Exactly.
And I was thinking, I have a pretty big record collection, and I was thinking about doing kind of what you're doing, like do a YouTube channel where I talk about my records, because I have a lot of them. So this is a good start, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, like being this little guy with this little YouTube channel, living here in the countryside in south of Sweden, being able to like peek into your record collection is just a dream come true, even if it's just a small part of it. But also having a conversation and sort of see what's on your sort of mind when it comes to records and what's your take on it, really.
Yes.
But thank you so much for joining me today in this conversation. Could you like introduce yourself a little bit, if there's anyone out there who doesn't know who Dennis Lyxzén is?
I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that don't know who I am. I'm a musician, primarily a singer from the north of Sweden.
Yeah,
I play in bands like Refused, INVSN, Fake Names, International Noise Conspiracy, and plenty of others. I am also a big-time record collector. I've run 3 record labels also in my days. So I've been surrounded by music my entire life, basically. And yeah, that's who I am. A very condensed version of my life.
Very condensed. I bet. Have you always collected vinyl records, or is it something that has come as a musician, or what's your first memory sort of getting vinyl records?
I mean, I've always collected vinyl my entire life. Since I was when I was 8 years old, I got into the Beatles because John Lennon died when I was 8, and then I saw the photos in the magazines, and I was like, oh, these guys look cool. So I stole all my dad's Beatles records, because he had a bit of a record collection. I mean, not that big, but a couple of hundred records. He worked at a record distribution company in the 70s, which is quite interesting. Yeah, but so he had some records. I stole a Beatles record from him, and then when I was 12, I bought my first record, and that was kind of the start of a long deterioration into madness.
Yeah, into madness. Yeah, I read in an interview that your first record was David Bowie's "Let's Dance."
Yes, it was.
I picked it out here.
Right here.
Such a fantastic, what a fantastic record, isn't it?
Yes. And it's my it's I mean it's the same it is the copy that I bought when I was 12 years old. So
Okay.
you can see all the sticker residue and everything, and it's been played a lot, I must say.
I
It's
bet.
definitely it definitely sent me into the trajectory of just music basically.
I love the sound of that record. David Bowie always seemed like a guy who was right there in front of sort of the production-wise, at least. One of few records from the 80s, in my opinion, that still sounds great. That isn't too overproduced.
I mean, it's very much a record of its time, and it's interesting that it's Bowie's most commercially successful record.
Okay.
And people do consider it as like the peak of his creative power, and after that it kind of slides down, which is not necessarily true, but it is an interesting record because it is very much an 80s type of record. But yeah, I mean, I was 12 and I heard Let's Dance and I'm like, oh, I love this. So, and it's funny because I bought this one and then I bought Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, like the second record I bought, which is this new wave record, which is much more credible and much more cool. But that's you don't know that when you're 12.
But it's still a great record.
Yeah. And I mean, Bowie's one of those. It is interesting because he's one of those artists that my entire life, when I was like, I got into metal and hard rock, and then I got into punk and hardcore.
Yeah.
And Bowie was still like this presence that like I kept buying his records, and he was like almost excluded from everything else. And I mean, in the 90s when we were at our most like hardcore, like really, narrow-minded, I remember trading. There's this beautiful picture disc 7-inch box set with Bowie that I traded with some crappy hardcore record. I'm like, oh, we gotta get this Bowie record. So he's always been with me, and yeah, he's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. Do you have any favorites of is Let's Dance your favorite record, or do you have any other?
I mean, I think Low is my favorite. Well, Low is my favorite record. Let's Dance is, of course, for myriad of reasons, a favorite record. Yeah. I mean, when I woke up and I saw the news that Bowie died, Let's Dance was the first record I put on. I actually ran up and put on Let's Dance like the second I read the news. Okay. And then I listened to Low for the rest of the week. But I mean, I like all of his stuff. I actually, the last record I bought, or the last records I bought, was the 3 Bowie records that I didn't have on vinyl. Was the last 3 records that I bought. Yeah,
he seems like an artist that no matter what genre you sort of get into, Bowie is one of those artists that you can always talk to, a metalhead or a hardcore fan or a freelancer, and we can talk about Bowie. So awesome. Yeah, I'm reading here. I have some notes, so you have to excuse me. Okay, yeah. So do you remember sort of the record that really got you into the madness? Do you remember a specific sort of record or time when you went from Let's Dance to sort of this, when you know that this is something more than just getting records?
Not really. I mean, I know there's a 7-inch that I bought like 15 years ago. That was like one of those 7 inches that I was like, all right, now I'm over this threshold, because I'm not going to collect 7 inches. It's so expensive. And then one day I bought like a 7-inch for like $120. And I'm like, I guess this is where I'm at. But before that, I mean, I've always been buying a lot of records. I've been obsessed with music since I was 12 years old. And I've always been buying records, but for a long time, I was just a guy that bought a lot of records. And then maybe 20 something years ago, I was like, now I'm actually a record collector.
Yep.
but it just kind of happened gradually that I was like the guy that always bought records. And then I started buying a lot of records, and then I started buying collections, and then I started really like, really digging into it. But I remember I bought a 7-inch with a Danish punk band called the Lost Kids. And it was like the first time I was like, I'm actually paying a shit ton of money for a 7-inch. And then after that, the floodgates will open, and that's like, yeah, I'll pay whatever now. Now it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I remember that too when I really started. I think that in the beginning when I started to buy records, and then back then you could buy like Beatles records and Rolling Stones records in my town for like under €5 back then. So I had some, like I said to myself, like I'm never gonna buy a record for over like €10, like 100 crowns. That was the top, like how much I could pay for a record. And I mean, I traded a record now for like $3,000 or something like that, a very obscure sort of the psych record. And I mean, that's the payment on a car. Like you get a really nice car for that record.
Yes,
it's insane. So it really escalated quite quickly. So do you think that it has your sort of, has the record collecting sort of game changed over the years? Is it the same today? Is it still a fun hobby to get into? Has it been, is it too much, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, I think that it definitely changed. And I kind of feel sorry for people that get into vinyl collecting now, because the prices are insane, ridiculous, and I mean, they're way too high. The advent of Discogs made record collecting quite easy, but also it doubled the prices on everything, which is a bit weird. And because I mean, one of the things about being a touring musician was that for years and years and years, you go to cities and go to record stores, and you can find records of like, holy shit, this one's only $4. You know, and because people didn't know. And like, I remember back in the day, they had these massive catalogs where they're like, oh, this one's quite expensive. But most people, it was just like kind of a guessing game. And now with Discogs, like you go to a flea market and the records are expensive because someone checked it out on Discogs. And I mean, that's a different conversation, but then you also know that the prices on Discogs are not really related to the reality of the situation. So
exactly,
I think it's much more difficult to collect records. It's much more difficult to, score those, like, holy shit, I found this one at a flea market, I can't believe it. That's increasingly, it doesn't happen that much anymore. I mean, once in a while you can do that, but so I think it's harder to collect records. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I bought in the 80s and the 90s where I was like, I'm just buying records, and I look at what they're worth now. I'm like, that's insane. Like, and I'm happy because a lot of it's not that great, but it's very expensive. So it's like, but yeah, I mean, on the flip side of that is like, I remember, 20 years ago when I got into buying and collecting, like you could look for a record for 5 years, like you didn't find it. And now with Discogs, you're like, I really want this record, and then 4 days later you have it in your house, which is kind of nice. It takes away a little bit of the chase, so to speak, like hunting and crate digging, which for me is still the most exciting thing. Like you can get on Discogs, or and you can sort of Google around, but there's something about going to the record store or and then you flip through records and you pull something up, and you look at the label, and you look at the year, you look at photos, and like, I don't know what this is, but I need it. I didn't know I needed this record, but I really need to buy this one. And that you can't really have that that physicality on online.
No, it's I still think that the record store is super important. So I get sad every time I see a record store closing the doors. I feel like because it's like a thrill when you found a record back in the day, and with that you knew was worth more than you paid for it. And I remember I bought Harvest Moon by Neil Young for €8 in a store here in town. And obviously they had no idea what they had. It's a record from 92, I think, or something like that. So it's an expensive record. But I remember going to the cashier, just giving her the money and running out. Felt like I stole the record, but even if I paid for it, it was such a. But nowadays I get the thrill when I buy collections. So when you flip through, like I bought a jazz collection from this jazz drummer here in town. He had collected like his entire life, and they were in pretty beat condition, to be honest. But some of the stuff in there was great. So when flipping through his music, his like life, I got that thrill, the exact same thrill that than back in the day.
Yeah, no, it's
That's
cool.
the way to find
that. Yeah. I bought a small collection, which is the Creative records from someone just 2 summers ago. It was like a flea market, and some girl was saying, I'll buy the full crate. And that was the same thing. I paid her like $150, and she's like, "Are you sure? That sounds like a lot of money." And I came home, I'm like, "Holy!" I mean, it was a great collection, and so that's kind of exciting when you get that. Like, oh, I didn't. And as I said, sometimes when you buy collections, you're like, I didn't know that I needed this record, but then when you find it, like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I need this record right now. So yeah, that's quite exciting. But then you need money and you need cash to be able to buy collections, and it's not always easy to get people selling their collections.
No, obviously, and I'm. It's also a sort of double-sided sword, because I don't want people to get rid of their collections, even if they're old. Yeah, I mean, I want them to play the records instead. Like, get a record player or something and enjoy your records. Don't sell them, but then another shit. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm lost for words. I'll show you a record. I pulled stuff from my collection that I thought, like, this I think that Dennis will know of and we can talk about. But then I just shifted entirely and thought, like, I'll pull some stuff and maybe Dennis doesn't know about it, and I can recommend stuff to him, because when my daughter grows up, I want to sit down and say that I recommended records to Dennis Lyxzén.
That's fantastic. I'm a little bit of a sucker. I'm one of those guys. I'll go into the record store, and I have friends that own record stores, and they'll put on a record. I'm like, I'm buying this. I don't know what this is. I'm a bit of a sucker. I just love music. I always get excited when people say you need to have this record. I'm like, okay.
I bet you know this one. You know about the artist anyway, but I don't know. When I listen to, because I've been listening to your music now the last days, just to really sort of read up is the wrong word, but listen up. And I don't know, but this artist came to mind. Scott Walker, is that something that you have sort of ventured into?
Yeah, I have the first 4 Scott Walker records. And I was wait, I'm lying. I have the first 4 ones, and I have the last 3 ones when it went super experimental.
Yes, exactly.
I have the Walker's Brother record from the Nightlife from the 80s, one of my favorite records. I love Scott Walker. He's amazing. That's
awesome. And I have the same. I have the 4 first ones, and then I have the one he did with Sun O and Bosch. Fantastic records, and in one way I think that he reminds the Bish Bosch record. It reminds me a little bit of Bowie's last record. Also, it feels like you can really hear the last sort of the dying breath of a artist.
It's interesting, when I bought that record at a record market, and I bought like 2 of those, like that one with Sun O and another one of the late ones. Yeah. And the guy just looked at me. He's like, "It's not what you think it is." I'm like, "I know what this is. I'm getting this. I know what's going on here." Yeah. But that record, that's number. Which one did you hold up?
Number 3.
It's one of my favorites. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love this. I think that the fourth one is the one that I've listened to the most, but the third one I think is the best record by him, in my opinion. I think it's
amazing,
and its cover artwork. I mean, super nice. Okay, so I was right. You knew about that record.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you feel at all talking about The Shape of Punk to Come, or have you talked about it too much?
I mean, I've talked about it quite a lot, but I mean, it's
when I listened to it today, I felt like, because I haven't talked to that many musicians on your level. When you went into the studio and when you recorded this, did you guys feel that you were making a masterpiece?
No,
did you feel like this is like history here?
No, I think David kind of knew, like our drummer, he kind of knew, because I remember we had a conversation when the record was done, and I was quite worried that people wouldn't get it, like especially how rigid and narrow-minded the hardcore scene can be. So I was like, I don't think people's gonna buy it. They're not gonna get it. And Dave's like, oh no, this is a brilliant record. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And I mean, it is interesting because I talked about this many times, but the record came out, the reviews were fine. They were fine, not excellent, but they were fine. Yeah. And then we played shows, and as I feared, the hardcore kids didn't like it.
Yeah.
And we broke up. With a sense of like, yeah, that was, no one cared about that record. And then next year is the 25-year anniversary of that record, and we're doing like a deluxe edition thing, and people still want to hear it. It's pretty amazing how that happened.
Awesome. And how many people and groups it has sort of inspired. It has to be I imagine it's a great feeling. And I remember the first time I think I pirated the documentary film when I saw that, because I come from a film background, and I just thought that it was the best, because I grew up, like I was 16 maybe when The Shape of Punk to Come came out, and I was deep into metal, but so I didn't listen to your records back then. But I remembered how much of an impact it had the years to come. I went to Hultsfred in 99, something like that, and it was still sort of, they still talked about Refused wherever you went. Fantastic. I just want to know if when I listened to it today also, I love your voice and I love the lyrics, but David's playing on it, like the drums on it are just from another planet.
Well, no,
I think it's insane.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
It's amazing. And how much of I mean, The Shape of Punk to Come, I guess, is from The Shape of Jazz to Come. How much of jazz influence did you have on it? Did you listen to jazz when you recorded the record? Do you come from a jazz background?
Well, I mean, when we were recording the record, David was really into jazz. I mean, he's the jazz guy of the band, and he was super into jazz. And like there's like is there a Mingus poster on the record or something like that?
Yeah, maybe. I know that's a sample from Night in Tunisia with Art Blakey.
Exactly. I mean, he was super into jazz, and I remember when we were working on the record, there were some riffs that I didn't like. Okay. And there was like a heated argument, and David screamed at me. And his whole point was that I didn't understand the complexity of music, and he yelled in my face, "You don't understand Charlie Parker." Okay. And that was kind of his like fuck you, you don't get what we're trying to, you don't understand Charlie Parker, which is quite funny.
Yeah, now it is, I guess. Maybe not back then.
But yeah, David listened to, at that point, David was super into jazz music. I was really into like Northern Soul and garage rock, and
Okay.
James Brown and that kind of stuff, which also, I mean, Can I Scream? It's James Brown, that's what it is, Can I Scream? It's just, so we were really moving away from hardcore because, when you're young, everything moves really quickly. And it was just, everyone was going in different directions. And then we managed for a little bit of a second to hold it all together to create this record,
Yeah. Fantastic, and I won't get into politics because I can't talk about it. It's but we had an election in Sweden 2 days ago, and went kind of south.
Yeah, it's not great. It's pretty fucking horrible.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible. It's really fucking horrible. And when listening to your records, also, I thought like, you have to sort of scream out your opinions like you do on the Refused records, because people aren't fucking listening. Like,
nope, that's true. It is interesting because when you're young, like the approach of being in a political band is like you take the most dystopian thought and idea, and then you scream that on top of your lungs, and then here we are like 25 years later, and you're like, oh, that's so much worse than our most dystopian idea. So it's pretty sad, and let's not get bogged down in politics.
No.
It's definitely a good time to discover some protest music.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any records to show us? Did you bring anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Here's a good protest record that I really like, Bikini Kill.
Okay.
A feminist punk band from the 90s, and they're one of those bands where, the hardcore world was very masculine and very male oriented, a lot of testosterone, and Bikini Kill was a part of the Riot Girl movement, and they talked about feminism. So that band and that whole movement in the 90s was massively important for me to sort of understand feminism and understand, different perspectives. Basically, they're punk rock, but they had a different agenda. So that's a great record, Bikini Kill. All their stuff is actually great, but I really like this. The last full length, Reject All American. It's great. They just did a reunion right before the pandemic, and Refused was supposed to play with them at the Way Out West Festival, but it got canceled because of the pandemic. So,
Shit. Awesome tip. So just simple questions like, do you collect mostly 7 inches or 12 inches, or is it just you buy whatever you come by?
I love the 7-inch as a format. I think it's pretty fantastic. There's something about being active in listening when you listen to 7 inches, because you have to go and switch the sides. So what I'll usually do is I'll bust out a bunch of 7 inches, and then I'll just listen to 7 inches for like 2 hours, and then you get really engaged. But I have a lot of 12 inches LPs, which is, my main, biggest bulk of my collection is LPs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I have do you know this one? It's a punk.
Yeah, Vicious Visions, of course. Is that original pressing?
No. I wish I had
not.
an original pressing of this. Everyone does. It's a band from Halmstad, where I come from.
Yeah, they are from Halmstad. Yeah, that's true.
And I think it was like 4 years into dating this girl that I now also have a daughter with. We broke up, but this is her uncle. He died of cancer maybe 10 years ago now, something like that.
Oh wow!
So I knew about it. He had some copies, and he gave it to. He had 2 children, so he gave it to them, and they had no idea what they had. Like, and when I got told about this, I said to him like, take care of that record. It's going to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's only maybe 100 or 200 copies of that 7-inch.
Yeah, and they did like
really,
like 50 in color, and the rest was just like black and white, something like that, because they ran out of color. I heard, at least.
It's a great 7-inch. Yeah, I have the reissue, and someone also put out the 12-inch, like an LP compilation, like 2 years ago, that I have. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it's cool. It feels like
question I wish that I had.
Yeah, I saw it on Nostalgipalatset in Stockholm for I don't know, some years ago now, and then back then it was like $2,000, something like that, and I thought that was crazy. Or was $1,000. Anyway, I would be a rich man today if I bought it back then. Because it goes for so much money. Do you sort your collection in any way, like in different genres, or is it just like everything into the shelves?
No, I tried to for a little bit. I was like, I'm gonna. Speaking of Swedish, very expensive 7-inches.
Oh shit! Cool.
Yeah, it's the first pressing.
Shit!
It's very expensive. Ebba Grön on Eiffel Records. It's the real deal.
Shit, that's cool. Have you had it for long, or is it sort of a new?
I had it for 10 years, but it's newish. It was obviously expensive when I bought it, but it's way more expensive now. And I mean, I have a bunch of pretty pricey stuff that I'm lucky enough to buy just before it got super expensive.
Yeah, I'll bet you have to start that YouTube channel. So show off those stuff.
So I organize my records. It's a bit weird, but it makes sense. I tried for a little bit to have everything just alphabetically, but I have a bit of an OCD mind. I couldn't really cope with that. It got weird. So here's what it is. It's like over here we have funk and soul, that type of music, and then I have American rock from the 60s, 70s, British rock from the 60s, 70s, metal, hard rock, and then you have I'm very like it's genre plus country plus decade.
Okay, that's awesome.
So over here, that's the shelf over here. That's American hardcore from between 1978 to 1990.
Awesome.
That's all of that is American hardcore.
Shit.
Yeah. So I mean, and then I have a indie rock from the UK, 80s, 90s, indie rock from the States, 80s, 90s. I have industrial music over here. So I have a
lot of genres, and a
lot of genres. I
always felt envious of musicians who was into record collecting, because if I was a musician full time and bought records, I would tell my wife that I had to buy them because it's inspiration and it's part of my work. But now when I come home with records, this is just waste of space and a lot of money. Do you think when you buy stuff that is really expensive, do you think that it's because of your work and getting inspiration?
I mean, the great thing, I don't know, the great thing is if you are a musician, you can do write-offs on records because it's inspiration material.
Yeah, but it is.
But I mean, I think what it is like when you are a musician and you have a creative line of work, everything is inspiration.
Yeah.
It's kind of annoying because it means everything you do is kind of like you collect it in your in your brain, and then you spew it out when the time comes. But yeah, I mean, not only is record collecting it's a huge interest, but yeah, I play music. I'm a musician, so I take a lot of inspiration. And whenever we're going to record a record, if we're going to have a producer, the first thing we do is we sit down and talk about music. References, points of references. If I say I want it to sound more like Einstürzen Neubauten, I want the producer to say yes, of course. I don't want him to be like, what are you talking about? So it's important as for reference. I also DJ a lot, so good to have records that you can DJ.
Yeah. Okay, I'll show a record.
Yes,
I collect a lot of sort of original stuff, like early pressings. I go for my gut, and my gut says that old stuff that smells funny, that's the best stuff. So I don't buy that much new music or reissues. But have you heard Big Chestnut?
Yes, I have. Not that record though.
This is an awesome record. Highly recommended. It's I think that it's the peak of his recording career. A very sad sort of soul, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's great. I have some of his early stuff, but you know how it is with some artists, like you trail off after a while and you get into other stuff. But yeah, he's pretty cool. So I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, it's a great one. Do you have anything else that you want to?
I'll show you when we were talking about. Have you heard this record?
Yeah, awesome. Right, is that an original press?
Yes, it is. Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, of course it is.
I bought it. This one I bought 20 plus years ago.
Shit.
And now it's quite pricey and expensive, but there is a reissue of it that I just saw. But yeah, it's super good, like heavy psych. Really cool record. It's a bit. Yeah. The artwork is awesomely weird, and they're called orangutan, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah, I bet that's one of those records. Like back in the day, when you flipped through a crate, if you found that record, that was going home with you. If it cost like 50 cents, something like that. I had no idea what it was, but it looked interesting. Yes. Let's see here. So, yeah, another question that I've thought of in my car today is how much influence do you have on the sort of, I mean, you're interested in vinyl, but when you make your music, when you release your records, how much do you have to say when it comes to the sort of vinyl editions of your own music when you release it, like colors and singles, and I mean in vinyl?
Everything. I mean, it's for me, it's insanely important that you get the vinyl version right, even if it's a limited edition or if it's a small pressing. So yeah, everything. I mean, I'm also the guy in all my bands that has very strong opinions about the artwork, about the, you know, like everything, how the vinyl is supposed to look, the color of the vinyl, everything. So I mean, for me, that's massively important. And we even done with something like INVSN, like we did a record a couple of years ago, and then the label said we don't want to repress it. We repressed it ourselves. We're like, okay, can we repress it? They're like, yeah, whatever. So we've done that a lot, and for me, to get the vinyl version right is massively important. I spend a lot of times working on vinyl and vinyl reissues and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay. It's nice to hear. Are you still sort of giggling when you get a test pressing of something? Is it still like, do you feel like the collector or the musician when you get that test pressing?
A little bit of both. I mean, it's super exciting. It's I just got I play in a band called Fake Names, and I just got a test pressing last week of a record that comes in March, and I'm just like super excited. I blasted it full volume. I'm like, yes. I mean, it's funny. I had a label from like early 2000 for like 10 years called New Vogue up here in Umeå, where we released local punk bands. And it's funny, the reason I started the label is because there's a great punk band called the Regulations. And they put out 2 7-inches on some small label, and I tried to get them signed to a big label.
Okay.
And they wouldn't do it. And I'm like, but I need your LP. Like you need to put out a record so I can own it. Yeah. And then one day I had a meeting with them, and I said, I'll start a record label. I'll produce your first album. I'll put it out just so that I could have that record.
Yeah.
And that's how I started record label. It's very awesome. Selfishly motivated. I'm like, well, I like these bands. Why not put out the record so I can have the record, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you still run a label today, or is it?
No, it's No, I don't have the time. I wish I did, but I did it for 10 years. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't really put in that many hours, it's still a lot of work. And I don't have the time.
Oh.
I wish I did, but I've done 3 record labels in my life, and maybe, we'll put a cap on that, or maybe I'll start a new one. Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, also something that happened that's we don't really need to talk about was that when we started New Vogue, I'll send the master tapes to the pressing plant.
Yep.
It took me a week to get the test pressing, and then it took me 6 weeks to get the record. The last record we put out on the label, it took me 7 months to get the vinyl, and now it's almost a full year before you can get the vinyl. So that's also a reason why it's like it doesn't make any sense. It's too much just waiting. I mean,
just waiting.
The same for an artist. It's weird that like we're doing this Shape of Punk to Come vinyl edition thing, and the label's like, we need everything done 2 weeks ago if you want it out within a year. I'm like, oh, that's so insane. So it's kind of a bummer.
There's not many pressing plants in Europe left, is there? Not in the world, I guess, but they were.
But there's actually more pressing plants opening up because of the high demand. And I mean, it's of course the pandemic really affected it, but I mean also the fact that for a long time major labels didn't press vinyl, and now it's like and we had a small indie label and we could press 500 1,000 copies, and now it's like, well, we're going to reissue all of Bob Dylan's record, so we're going to press 100,000 records, and here's the payment, and then the pressing plant says, well, it's a little indie label that want to press 500 copies, we'll put them last in line. So I mean, that's also what happened. It's like a lot of big labels started doing reissues and started pressing vinyl, which means that the smaller labels, they definitely get affected by that.
Yeah, it sucks. I heard of a Swedish pressing plant that was opening now. Just I don't know, but they were going to be in this big fair in Solnahallen in September to introduce themselves to the sort of the vinyl world. So it's going to be fun to see what happens with that.
Yeah. I mean, you're hoping as a musician and also a record collector, you're hoping that you can cut the times, and so you can actually record a record and then actually put it out within a reasonable time.
Yeah, but if you record a record, are you releasing it on all formats at the same time? So is the vinyl holding a release up, or
yes, it does. I've noticed a lot of bands starting to do, here's the release date, you can pre-order the vinyl, it will come 3 months later.
Yeah, okay.
Which you can do, but it's there's something to be said about, like, here's the record, here's the vinyl, it's on streaming, maybe there's a limited CD version, so it's like there's something to be said about releasing everything out into the world at the same time. It's a bit more exciting.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, talking about the thrill of hunting for records now, I've gone back a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit on CDs, because when going to thrift stores and stuff like that, you can buy CDs now for like a euro a piece, and so I've been buying up sort of like the stuff that I listened to when I was growing up in metal and stuff like that. So because you can buy them so cheaply, and I bet that it's going to go the other way around for CDs soon too. People are going out on discos there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea with CDs was that you could store more information, and then they were supposed to be cheap, but then they actually jacked up the prices, and I don't know. It's weird. I have a box of CDs in a closet somewhere.
Okay.
I don't own a CD player, which is a bit weird, but it's mostly stuff from the 90s where a lot of friends only release CDs.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's cool now with the vinyl sort of resurgence that you get records with bands that you liked in the 90s, and they're like, for the first time ever on vinyl. I'm like,
vinyl,
yes.
yeah.
So actually, I'm going to show you this one. This is a cool record. This is a hardcore band from Holland called Dead Stool Pigeon.
Okay, cool.
And they released it's just hardcore, but they released 3 CDs in the 90s. That was like some of our favorite CDs, and we just kept listening to them. And then, so for 20 years, I mean, like, where's the vinyl? And then they did, it's all 3 of them. It's like a triple album, nice, with all 3 CDs. I'm like, that's super awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's just fast hardcore.
I'm going to grab something. I had a same experience with. I'm a huge fan of Tom Patton. So Fantomas. Same thing. They had a director's cut. I played that to death on CD, but they never released it on vinyl until they did the box set with all their material. And I was super stoked. Very expensive to ship to Sweden, unfortunately, but
I mean, it's worth it. Here's a question: have you ever regretted buying a record?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. No, I mean, regretted a lot of stuff that I didn't buy.
Well, that's the if you get bogged down in like, oh, I remember seeing that record, or then your brain explodes. But there are very few times when you're like, oh, I'm going to spend $100 on a record, and then you're going to regret that. Usually it's just like, oh, it's fine, it's a record,
Yeah. And with the 10,000 hours of reading and listening and stuff like that to vinyl records, you have some sort of, I don't think that with this kind of level of this hobby that you can do super bad choices and bad sort of deals on stuff. You have sort of a core knowledge of the music, like, and the vinyl. I'm going to show you another one. One of my favorite artists, because I want to show a woman also. It's all men here. Karen Dalton. Do you know about Karen Dalton?
Yes, I know that record. I don't have that record. I heard that. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, her voice is just from another planet.
Then I realized that the first pressing is very expensive.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a first pressing.
Of course it is. Yes, but that's definitely it's on my want list. It's a record that I want to buy, but it's one of those records like it's great. I don't want to spend that much money on it.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of those on the want list. I agree. Like when you see them, I have had stuff like that I should own. Like as a collector of jazz or psych, I should really own it. But every time I found it, it was just like, no, I'm not going to pay that for the record. I'll just wait. And then 7 years went by.
Yeah, and it's twice as expensive. I mean, I have to say, like, I buy most of the stuff I buy is original pressings. I'm a little bit, especially when it comes to like the punk, hardcore, sort of alternative music stuff. But a lot of stuff, if it's like, if it's something like that, I would buy a reissue, because I'm like, I'm not going to pay $200 for this when I can buy it for $25. So I mean, if there's stuff that I mean, that's the same thing with a lot of like the psych stuff. I just bought Irish Coffee and the first Mighty Baby. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to pay tons of, it's fine buy those in reissues because, but when it comes to punk and hardcore, I'm like, no, I need the original pressing.
Yeah.
I just need it. So it depends on where you want to put your focus. Because I mean, I know that's the deal too. When you collect like psych records, they're quite pricey, a lot of them.
Yeah. A lot of them are really pricey, but that's kind of cool. I've never thought of that. Like, if you're a hardcore and punk guy, and you want to put your sort of your money on the original pressings when it comes to those, but you still buy psych records, like reissues. Yes. You keep sort of, and me buying original of psych, but I buy like this one. I had to buy this one when it came out, and now this
Great.
doesn't exist, I think, on a original press. But I buy reissues of other genres that I don't collect hardcore. Like so
Exactly. Yes.
It's yeah, it's fun to be able to contribute to other genres also, but not spending those super amounts on those genres.
And it's interesting because you have like two categories. You have people that just buy records because they like records.
Yeah.
And then you have record collectors like us that actually, I mean, you know, you look at the Matrix numbers and you look, oh no, this is the UK pressing. I don't want that. And I'm a little bit of both. I buy a lot of records just because I like music. And some of the stuff, I don't really care the pressing. I just want this record. Yeah. And some of the stuff I'm super specific on the pressing. So for me, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I buy a lot of stuff. Just I like music. I want to hear new music all the time. I want to hear new records, discover new artists all the time. And so I'll buy stuff. And then if there's something that I really like, I might be like, oh shit, this is a great record. I might want to get the original pressing of this one because it's so good, you know. So it's a little bit of like how you approach. Because I mean, as I said, when I got into buying records, it was just because, well, I mean, first of all, at that point in time, the records or the music that you had at your disposal were the records that you owned.
Yeah.
You know, there were no Spotify, there was nothing, there's no YouTube. So I mean, if you wanted to listen to a lot of records, you had to own a lot of records. Or you could tape them, which I did too. I had a lot of tapes and a lot of records. So it is interesting because now it's like everything is at your disposal. So then record collecting becomes a little bit of a different ball game, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I went into the one store here in Halmstad. I had and they only sold CDs when I was going in there buying stuff. But they had 2 listening stations with those headphones hanging from the ceiling. So you went there with your CD and you asked him to put on, and that was like, he was just like, yeah, sure. He knew that I wasn't going to buy it. I just wanted to listen to it. So you had like 3 chances to listen to 3 records or something like that before they tossed you out of the store and you didn't buy anything. But telling my sort of coworker today, who is from sort of late 90s, she doesn't understand how could that be like. It's like the Stone Age or something like that.
I mean, there's something to be said about the physical format, because the physical format is why we're talking today.
Yep.
I mean, we could just talk about music in general, but we are talking about the physical format of actually where records are. I mean, and I think when the CDs came, it wasn't that exciting, you know, like it wasn't like the packaging was next. As you said earlier, you want it to smell a bit funky. You want it to be that like, oh, here's vinyl, you know, there's something about how tangible it is. And it's artwork. It's like, you know, you take it out and it's like gatefold and everything. I mean, it's quite exciting. And I think that's something that we shall not forget. And
no, definitely.
I mean, yeah. And I assume it's the same for you, because when you get into record collecting, and not just like I'm a person that likes music, a lot of your interest becomes archaeology.
Yes.
And you become almost an archivist, because that's how I feel like I collect American hardcore from the 80s, and I fill in gaps of records. I'm like, it's not necessarily that great, but it has a place in this world of me being an archivist. I mean, I have an archive up in the attic where I have every record I ever released. I have 3 copies of them, all of them.
Cool.
In an archive up, because I'm like, well, you know, I just want to be able to say I have all this, and here's what it is. And I mean, so it becomes a different thing when you start really digging in, because, you know, it's. I'm talking a lot, but that's what we're doing.
No, that's why we're here.
Yeah. So when you get into, I'd say, metal, and everybody's like, I like Metallica and Slayer, but I was the guy already when I was like 13. I'm like, okay, you like Metallica and Slayer, but I like Celtic Frost and Voivod and Destruction, and I just became the guy that just dug deeper all the time. People discovered the Rolling Stones. I was the guy that started digging, like, what other kind of 60s mod garage psych bands are out there. And I mean, it's quite fascinating to become an archaeologist like that.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that, but you're definitely right. And I wonder who are you sort of archiving it for? It's like, yeah, I agree. This is like an archive, but it's an archive of my lifestyle. Like, this is part of my identity. So even if someone got this, it's not theirs. This is mine. Like, I have collected this. This is part of me.
It's a very interesting existential question. That it's quite hard to answer, because it's like, I have a bunch of friends that are a record collector, but no one really lives close to me.
Okay.
I mean, the drummer of INVSN collects hardcore records.
Yeah.
He moved to Stockholm, but we used to hang out all the time, just listen to records. So now every other week we call each other. I'm like, so what have you been buying? What did you pick up? Oh, that one. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to. So, but it is interesting because it's a weird library of music that I use. My partner, to a little bit, a certain extent. I mean, she likes vinyl, but she doesn't really know. A lot of times she can call me like, where is this record? I'm like, okay, it's on that shelf over there. You have to, But I don't know. I mean, I had a friend over a couple of months ago, and he's also a record collector. And there was like a crate of American, really weird indie from the 80s.
Yeah.
And he's like looking through it, and he looked at me, he said, do you ever get tired of people coming to your place and no one has any idea about any of your records? And I'm like, yeah, it kind of happens. He's like, yeah, same to me. Like people come over, and like when your music tastes become as eclectic as ours, a lot of people, like, they don't understand what are these records? Like, who are these artists? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah. And I can almost like be angry at friends of mine that says that they are interested in music, and they know about my obsession and what I have down here in my basement, but they never go down here and pull out records, maybe out of respect, but I think that it's just not like, they are not there when it comes to the music interest. They like music, but this is something else. Like,
no, this is an obsession for sure. I mean, it is that's what it is. But I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I have this. A lot of people. All right, it's a bit existential once again.
Yeah.
A lot of people discover music in their teens, the formative years, and then they form an opinion, and they're like, this is who I am because this is the music that I like. And surveys has been made when people say around the age of 28, people stop discovering new artists and new musicians.
Okay.
Because of life, usually, and interest. And I mean, people get comfortable in who they are. And, they'll discover a new artist every other year. It's be like, oh, that guy's kind of cool. But you have all those friends that are like, when they listen to records, they only listen to the records they listened to when they were in the 20s.
Yes.
My life, I want to discover a musician, an artist, or record every day that I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
That's my goal in life. Like, every day I want to hear something I never heard before.
Yeah.
I'm not a very nostalgic person, so I don't really see music as like, oh, this is a part of my youth, and this is like, for me, everything's fair game. Like, I can listen to something I listened to when I was 20, but I also want to discover new music every day. And I think for a lot of people, music is just something. It's just there. It's just like, oh, I like music, but it's just there. And for me, it's like an active. It's a very active thing.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. Out of my upbringing, I was deep into Nirvana, like a lot of other people, obviously. But I listened to Nirvana a lot. And now when collecting, I had sort of the records, but I never listened to them because I could listen to them on stream, stuff like that. Those records didn't really sort of give me that tingle in the belly. So I actually sold them, and maybe I'll regret it down the line. I don't know, but it's like I didn't need them in my collection. I don't know where I'm going with this sort of theory of mine, but they didn't feel like they were necessary because I knew about the music and I can listen to it whenever I want on Spotify.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's you're moving forward. You know, it's like you want to discover new music, you want to broaden your horizon, you want to discover more and listen to more, and you know.
Exactly. And now I remember what I wanted to say. Vinyl records make me do that. Like you say, I want to discover a new group or a new record every day. And the vinyl format, I think, through my life has made me do that. And I am a nostalgic person. I buy very little new music, and listen to very little new music. But there are so much old music to discover. I've only now went into sort of private pressed folk and psych acid folk.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those records, like if you find, because there are a lot of records out there, especially from the States, that you can find still for like under $10 that were only pressed in, I mean, next to like 100, pressed in 100 copies, something like that. And it's insanely good. But it hasn't been discovered yet. So it feels like you said, I feel like an archaeologist digging for unfound records. Like,
that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I feel the same way when you get into something new, because I'm very much a guy, like I said before, like if I get into something, I mean, latest example would be I got really into like synth and industrial music maybe 7 years ago, and I bought like racks of it.
Okay.
And then at the end you have like, okay, these are amazing records, but then it's like a brand new world is opening up and you can buy all these records. So one of my biggest fears in life is getting into jazz music, because there's way too many records that I need to buy if that happens.
I think it's a good thing to just keep that door closed. It's
it is. I just bought a Pharoah Sanders Karma record.
Oh,
quite expensively, I must add.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. And I'm like, oh man, this is. It's bordering on like, you know.
Yeah. Have you listened to Alice Coltrane? John Coltrane's wife. Insanely good also. They are also getting very pricey, but Alice Coltrane, when I started listening to her, it felt like I discovered Alice Coltrane, but I didn't, but people weren't talking about Alice Coltrane. So
I'm gonna show you a record now with a band that I felt that I discovered. I didn't discover them at all, of course. It's a British band called The Sound.
Okay.
And this is their it's like their fourth record. It's like an EP. When I discovered them, it's like they're on the same label as Echo and the Bunnymen, and that vein of like kind of British post-punk. Adrian Borland, the singer, is one of my favorite singers. And when I discovered them, their music was not on social media or at Spotify at all, or nowhere online. And the records were really hard to find, not super expensive because, you know, no one knew about them. Their first two records was a bit pricey. And within the last like 7 years, there's been a documentary made about that guy's life. All the records have been repressed. They're all up for streaming. But 10, 12, 14 years ago when I discovered it, like I didn't know, not a single person that I played it to have heard this band, or not a single person that I was like, the sound, and it was like, we don't know what you're talking about. So sometimes you're lucky and you find something that, I mean, obviously their records were out on big labels and they toured and they were banned in the 80s, but they never had that impact. And it's quite exciting when you find a band like that.
Yeah, and I think that that's also a part of my a part of the sort of the identity that I talked about earlier, where it's important to find one of those bands like that you can claim as your own. I don't know. I had the same with Big Star. I had never heard about Big Star like 12 years ago, something like that, and stumbled over their first record, and it just blew my mind. Like it sounded like it was made yesterday, and it was made in the early 70s. And I talked every single sort of friend that I met, I talked with, I recommended and listening to Big Star. So it feels
amazing.
Like I'm going to show you a record. Have you heard? It's not. I think it's political, and I don't know which genre that you could put it in. But have you heard Jim Ford's Harlan County?
No, I have not.
It's an awesome record. Harlan County, they did a documentary in the 70s, I think, about the mining sort of.
All right.
It's a really, really good, almost funky country-ish Americana record from early 70s. So highly recommend it if you haven't heard. I think would be up your alley.
Yeah. Right. So I'm gonna give you it's because all right, so here's one of my favorite bands of all time. Voivod.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever listened to Voivod.
I've listened to a little bit. I remembered when I was into metal that and reading up on like Close Up magazine and stuff like that. They had Voivod on there.
All right. So here's what it is. They started out as a very thrashy metal band. This record and the next two records are heavy influenced by psychedelia.
Cool.
They do wood covers.
No way.
Weird time signatures. It's phenomenal. Voivod. It's my favorite metal band, and people like. It's one of those bands like, but Voivod's fine, but this record and there's one called Angel Rat and one called The Outer Limits. They're like psychedelic metal with long songs and weird arrangements, and
awesome.
They had a little bit of an MTV hit with Astronomy of the Mind, which is insane.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Psychedelic metal. Yeah.
Are you deep into like your hi-fi equipment? Do you have a sort of a great hi-fi equipment, or is that secondary to the sort of the records and the music?
It's very secondary.
Yeah.
I have a good enough equipment. I actually, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, I need to upgrade my stereo because it wasn't great. But and I spent some money on it. But I mean, it is secondary. I mean, it sounds fine. It's a good stereo. I had good clip speakers, and I mean, it gets kind of loud in here. But I don't spend a lot. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that like, I'm gonna buy a cable for like, 1,000 euros.
No.
I'll spend it on 1 7-inch instead.
I bought. I came to a point where I started to buy records that was more expensive than the player I was playing it on. So I put a little bit of money into my equipment, but it's just like, it sounds great, but I'm not a huge sort of nut when it comes to the sound.
Here's I buy a lot of new records. I buy a lot of new music because I love music. Yeah. Here's an artist called Lingua Ignota. This record is it's industrial noise music mixed with classical music mixed with weird noisy indie rock. It's one of my favorite records of the last like 10 years. It's
nice.
Insane. She's put out 3 records and it's fucking marvelous stuff. Lingua Ignota. This is she's got 1 new record out after this, but this is my favorite, her second record.
I'll check it out.
Yeah,
I have I don't know. I'll show one more. This is one of the newest records that I bought, and it's insanely good. This is Bob Seger's Brand New Morning.
Really?
Yeah, I can't stand Bob Seger. When a guy, a psychic guy, told me about this record, I said that it was fantastic. I didn't believe him, so I checked it out on YouTube, and there's not a bad second on this record.
Wow.
It's like a folk record with melodies.
It's before like whatever the Silver Bullet Band or whatever it's called.
He did. I think that he released like 2 records with a band. If it was this Bob Seger System or whatever they were called, but then they ditched him and he was like super sad. So he's sitting in a rowing boat or something like that, and it looks like he's crying. Wow. That's just like the music. Like it's really sort of acoustic and it's a great record. Very sort of gloomy.
Cool. I'll check it out. Like, I mean, I used to own some of those Bob Seger rock records. They're not in the collection anymore, but I bought them. I'm like, it's kind of cool, but I'll check that one out.
I've never had a Bob Seger record, and I never thought I would own a Bob Seger record, but that is fantastic. So
there's something to be said about dismissing an artist and then hearing something like, oh, I was wrong. This artist is actually kind of cool. So I mean, it's pretty. I love that. I love that feeling when you, well, I hate that band, and then like, oh wait, this is actually awesome.
Yeah. And the other way around also, when you love a band and then you put out something, or you listen to something that is just utterly shit, it's just as depressing as glad you get when you find one of those. This has been awesome. I have 3 minutes to go before I have to send you a new link, but maybe we should wrap this up. I won't take more of your time. I'm so glad that I had a 1 hour conversation with you. I had a blast.
It went by really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we get to talk about records, especially in these gloomy times.
Yeah.
Music makes us happy. Music fills us with life and excitement. So I'm very happy about this, and I hope that some people would check this out, and maybe some more people will get into record collecting and
hopefully
buying vinyl. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
So I'm going to ask you before I leave, how many records do you have?
2,500 if I don't count my CDs, so just 12-inch vinyl records.
All right, that's pretty good.
And you?
12,000.
Me? Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really tell, but the scope of this room, it's a massive room, and it's my record room.
Yeah.
It's a big room. So yeah, 12,000.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's a lot of records.
That's an archive.
I mean, I would say maybe 4,000 is 7 inches, and then the rest is 12 inches. I'll have maybe a couple of hundred cassettes as well.
I'll write some songs. I get them out on a record, and then I'm a musician, and then I'll get 12,000 records.
That sounds perfect. Good plan.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah,
absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'll stop the record here somewhere.